recalling the specifics of the interview is that it's very unlikely I would make a statement like that without some common understanding between myself and the reporter of what that term, which out of context is incredibly ambiguous, what it meant in the context of her series of questions.
And just to be sure I understand it, what you're saying is that you don't remember what the definition was, and you don't even remember that there was a definition, but you believe there must have been a definition or you wouldn't have been using these words. Is that fair?
There must have been a common understanding. I wouldn't say a definition.
How would that common understanding have been arrived at, other than through a definition?
Oh, somebody can give examples. I'm just saying there doesn't have to be a formal definition for two people to have a context in a conversation of what a word means. That is, neither one has to say, I define the word as follows. So maybe I interpreted your use of the word definition too strictly. Okay, so if you define definition for this conversation in a loose way, then I'll understand what you mean.
That is, what you need in order to understand the question is to have me define what is meant by definition,
at least loosely.
But what I mean by definition is what you meant by definition when you said that you wouldn't have answered this question unless you'd had a definition.
Common understanding. I use the word common understanding, and I'll stick with that. But I don't think quotations like that had any direct effect.
You put in the word direct effect, and I know that you're a very precise person from the statement you've already made today. So I've got to ask you what you mean by the use of the word direct there that you put in the answer that wasn't in the question. What do you mean? And that may have answered my question, sir, but because I know that you're a person that uses words very precisely, I need to be sure that we haven't missed something between the question and the answer. My question was whether you believed that this publication affected Netscape's business prospects. You said you didn't know of any effect. I just want to be sure that your answer was meant to apply to the full breadth of my question.
The full breadth of your question?
Yes, sir. If that's confusing to you, as I say, I will put the question as many times as I need to be sure that I get it clear to you. By like this, I mean the quotation in the Financial Times article.
I don't know what it means to be like that.
Is that because you don't understand the word like, or because you don't understand what it means to be like something?
Neither.
When you refer to Java as a competitive threat, why do you use the word Java as shorthand for what you now say doesn't relate to Java?
I didn't say that. It certainly relates to Java. Java runtime relates to Java. I mean, give me a break. Well, you used the word conclude.
Actually, in this last answer, I used the word believe. The last question, I used the word believe.
So you're changing the question.
Well, if believe and conclude is different for you, I'll ask it both ways.
Yeah, it's very different.
Okay, then let me ask the question so the record is clear of what you're
You don't want to let me answer the last one?
Or if that's what you're going to answer, let's read the question back so that we're sure. And would you reincorporate the question so that the record is clear that what follows is intended to be a response to this particular question?
Not quite sure. It was competitive. Is something that's competitive always a competitive threat? I'm not sure.
Mr. Gates, I think the record will show, and if necessary, we can go back to it, that that you used the term Java runtime threat. Do you recall doing that?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
That's not the same as competitive threat. Our whole activity here, everything we do really comes under what I just described.
everything Microsoft does comes under what you've just described. Is that your testimony, sir?
Mm-hmm.
Well, sir, does trying to undermine Sun come within the activity that you just described?
I don't know what you mean by that.
You don't?
No, I'm not sure.
Well, the subject of this is FW post agreement, correct, sir?
Yeah, that's what makes me think this was probably post-agreement.
Did that indicate to you that that was an important part of what you were getting in terms of the deal?
No such deal was ever struck, so I'm not sure what you're saying.
Was that an important part of the deal that you were trying to get, sir?
We never got as far as trying to get that deal, unfortunately.
You never got as far as trying to get that deal? Is that what
No.
you're saying?
No, well,
Who was at this executive staff meeting?
probably members of the executive staff.
Increasing IE share on Mac will help increase the number of Windows that you license?
Yeah, I went through the chain of logic that explains that to you. I don't know if you misunderstood some part of it.
All I'm trying to do is get your answers on the record, because if I begin to tell you what I think about your answers, we'll be here all day. Does increasing IE's share on Mac make it more likely that content providers will want to use IE?
I don't know what you mean by content providers using
know?
IE.
You don't know what
Content providers
are?
use servers. They don't use clients.
Do you know what content providers are?
Yes.
Give me an example of a content provider. Disney?
Disney.
Disney would be a content provider. Disney is an important content provider, correct, sir?
Now you're going to have to give me some context.
Without me giving you some context, you can't answer the question as to whether Disney is an important content provider. Is that your testimony under oath?
Important in what sense?
Important in the everyday, common usage sense of what important means. I think probably the word content providers was not used, but the word content was used by the witness, and I think it was in the context of answering.
If you're actually interested, it's the use IE where you seem to be confused about what content providers do. There's no question about what content provider means. When you say use IE, it's people who view content who use IE.
Right. And in order for somebody to view content through IE, that content has to be put someplace to begin with, right?
Yes.
Do you know a Mr. Poole who works at Intuit?
No.
You do not?
No. I think you're confused.
You may be right. But all I need to do is get your testimony down, and then people can judge for themselves. So it is your testimony that you do not know anyone who works at Intuit, whose name is Mr. Poole. Do you know somebody at Microsoft who deals with Intuit, who is named Mr. Poole.
Yes. It's quite distinct.
Yes. The distinction is actually at the heart of what I'm going at, sir.
Well, supporting can mean a lot of different things.
I mean,
I know. I
what
never.
you mean
I
when
never
you said it.
expected at any time that they would not support the Netscape browser in terms of running with it, working with it, supporting it, and all those things. In terms of did I use that specific word? No, I don't. I don't have a recollection. But it, support can mean quite a few things.
What I'm not doing right now is asking what you meant by support. What I'm asking you is whether you told Mr. Poole that. Do you understand the distinction?
Did I use those words?
That you told Mr. Poole.
See, if you're going to ask me, did I use the exact words, you can ask me that question. Or if you're going to ask me if I said something like that, that's okay. But then I have to actually understand what you mean by the words.
Let's take it one step at a time. Did you tell Mr. Poole that if Intuit was to have access to a position on the active desktop, Intuit would have to stop, quote, supporting, close quote, or could no longer, quote, support, close quote, the Netscape browser?
What does it mean when you keep going in and out of quotes like that?
It means you use the word supporting or you use the word support. And your APIs were not pure Java APIs.
No, some were and some weren't.
Yes, so some were and some weren't. But the APIs that you wanted people to use were APIs that were not pure Java APIs. Correct, sir?
No, we were glad to have people use both.
Were you indifferent as to whether they used your pure Java APIs or your proprietary APIs?
You've introduced the word proprietary, and that completely changes the question. So help me out. What do you want to know?
Is the term proprietary API a term that you're familiar with, sir?
I don't know what you mean by it.
Is it a term you're familiar with in your business?
I really don't know what you mean. You mean an API that you have a patent on?
Mr. Gates, is the term proprietary API a term that is commonly used in your business?
Let me give you
All I'm trying to do is get
the
an answer to
common
my
meanings that those words could have, and then you can pick one of them and ask me a question about it.
No,
It
all
can
I'm
be
doing...
do you want me to define proprietary API or
no,
not?
I don't want you to define proprietary API. I didn't ask you to define proprietary API. I asked you a simple question as to whether the term proprietary API was commonly used in your business. Now, I'm prepared to sit here as long as you want to answer questions that I haven't asked. But I have a certain number of questions that I'm going to ask at the end of these other answers. Now, this is a simple question. You can say yes, no, or it is used in lots of different ways. But then I can choose what to follow up on. Or you can simply make whatever statements you want, and I'll go back to my question afterwards. Does Windows include APIs that are written in what is described as a form or version of Java, but not pure Java?
You're talking about the language?
If you don't understand the question, Mr. Gates, you can simply say you don't understand the question.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't understand the question.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is get on the record what you say you understand and what you say you don't understand.
Yeah, anytime.
Would you read the answer back, please? Or the statement back?
Are you talking about the language?
No, I'm not talking about the language. If by the language you mean all of the things that you said about the Java language when we were talking about Java yesterday. How does making your APIs popular with developers relate to obtaining control of Java, if at all?
I don't know what it means to control Java. how can somebody control Java? What does that mean?
Is it your testimony that you have no idea what that means?
To control Java? I don't think anyone can control Java. It's like saying controlling BASIC or COBOL.
Do you really mean that, sir?
Yes.
What is JDirect? Did you have any discussions about the development of JDirect at the
I was
time
not
it's being
involved
developed?
in the design of JDirect.
Not asking you whether you were involved in the design of JDirect. I'm asking you whether you were aware at the time that JDirect was being developed that it was being developed.
I'm not sure.
Did you ever have any discussions with anyone about the development of JDirect at or about the time it was being developed?
I don't think so.
At the time that JDirect was being developed, did you know that people were trying to develop JDirect?
It's just a thunk.
My question is, did you know that they were trying to develop this thunk?
I doubt it.
There's JDK 1.2 has JFC, which we're going to be pissing on at every opportunity.
I don't know if he's referring to pissing on JFC or pissing on JDK 1.2, nor do I know what he specifically means by pissing on.
Well, do you know that generally he means by pissing on, he's going to be saying, and Microsoft is going to be saying uncomplimentary things?
It might mean that we're going to be clear that we're not involved with it, that we think there's a better approach.
Well, as you understand it, when Mr. Slivka says he's going to be pissing on JDK 1.2 as you seem to interpret it, at every opportunity, you interpret that as meaning that Microsoft is going to be saying uncomplimentary things about JDK 1.2.
I told you I don't know whether pissing applies to JFC or JDK.
Well, he's going to be pissing on, or Microsoft's going to be pissing on either JDK 1.2 or JFC or both, according to Mr. Slivka. Is that at least fair?
It appears to be what the sentence says.
And as the chief executive officer of Microsoft, when you get these kind of emails, would it be fair for me to assume that pissing on is not some kind of code word that means saying nice things about, but has the usual meaning that it would in the vernacular?
I don't know what you mean, this kind of email.
The kind of email that is sent to you by executives in the course of your business. Okay.
So all emails I get? Ben Slivka's not an executive.
All the emails you get from people telling you that they're going to piss on competitive products. That's what I'm talking about.
I don't remember mail like that. It looks like I got one, but believe me, it's not a term that's commonly used.
But you have no reason to think that he means it in any way other than the normal meaning of that term, do you, sir?
I think it's a term with multiple meanings. In this case, I think it means what you've suggested it means.
Okay. I thought it did too, and I hope to avoid actually going through the actual language.
Mr. Gates, isn't it the case that you told Mr. Moritz that browser share was a very, very important goal? And that's why he believed it.
I guess now we're delving into the inner workings of Paul Moritz's mind and how he comes to conclusions.
Well, let me try to ask you a question that won't require you to delve in anybody else's mind. Have you communicated to people other than Mr. Moritz within Microsoft that browser share was a very, very important goal?
Well, you've used several times, the very, very, and I don't know if you're asking me specifically about sometime where I used the words very, very? Is that the question?
Let me begin with that question. Have you communicated to people within Microsoft, other than Mr. Moritz, that browser share was a very, very important goal, using those words?
I don't remember using those words.
Have you communicated the substance of that to people within Microsoft?
Help me understand. If you communicate to people that something is important, is the substance of that identical to communicating to them it's very, very important?
Would it be, in your view, Mr. Gates, if you were using those terms, would important be the same as very, very important?
Not identical.
What would be the difference?
The two varies.
And what significance in terms of substance would those two varies have?
A speaker's tendency towards hyperbole.
Now, other than your tendency, if you have one, to hyperbole.
I'm not getting your question.
Okay,
Are you trying to ask what I was thinking when I wrote this sentence?
let me begin with that. What were you thinking when you wrote this sentence? If
I
that's
don't
what you want.
remember specifically writing the sentence.
Does that mean you can't answer what you were thinking when you wrote the sentence?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so since that question is that you don't have an answer to, you don't have an answer to that question, let me put a different question.
No, I have an answer. The answer is I don't remember.
Okay. You don't remember what you meant. Now let me try to ask you,
I don't remember what I was thinking.
is there a difference between remembering what you were thinking and remembering what you meant?
If the question is what I meant when I wrote it, no.
Okay. Were there specific competitive products that in January of 1996 you wanted to increase Microsoft's share with respect to those products? Do you understand the question, Mr. Gates?
I'm pausing to see if I can understand it.
If you don't understand it, I'd be happy to rephrase it.
Go ahead and rephrase it. I probably could have understood. Thought about it, but go ahead.
Okay.
Users were making choices about which browser to select.
Is the term competition a term that you're familiar with, Mr. Gates?
Yes.
And does it have a meaning in the English language that you're familiar with?
Yeah, I haven't. Any lack of understanding of your questions doesn't stem from the use of that word.
Okay. And you understand what is meant by non-Microsoft browsers, do you not, sir?
No.
You don't? Is that what you're telling me? You don't understand what that means?
You have to be more specific with.
Was that in whole or in part a result of an attempt to find out what their vulnerabilities were, Mr. Gates?
Did you end the question?
Both your counsel and I had thought so.
Okay.
Paragraph of this message says, what kind of data do we have about how much software companies pay Netscape?
It's weird that you're repeating this exhibit without the enclosures to the email. It's very misleading to have the version of the document. You had the real exhibit earlier. Did you lose it?
The first email on exhibit 353 is an email from Mr. Ballmer to you and others, correct?
Right.
The second email is an email from you dated December 1, 1996 at 9:24 p.m., correct?
Yes.
There was a third email from Mr. Nehru dated November 27, 1996 at 11:54 a.m., correct?
Well, it's not a separate email. It's part of my email.
Well, sir, let me just try to see if we can get this straight. And we'll read this whole thing into the record if we have to.
I can explain what you're confused about.
I'm not confused, Mr. Gates. Indeed, I think I stated it accurately. If you want to start talking about what I think, but my function is to ask you questions. Your function is to give me answers to my questions. Neither of our functions are to debate the other at this point. Exhibit 353 starts with an email dated December 1, 1996 from Mr. Ballmer to you, correct?
There's only one email in here, which is the one from Steve, which has 2 emails enclosed in it.
Well, what is enclosed here are 2 additional emails, correct, sir?
They're part of Steve's email.
That is, Steve, and by Steve you mean Mr. Ballmer, correct?
Yes.
Is sending around with his email 2 earlier emails, correct?
They're part of his email.
Well, when you say they're part of his email, he didn't write them, did he, sir?
No, but they're part of his email.
That is, he is sending them around. That's what I said 3 times. He's sending them around with his email. He wrote something, and in addition to what he wrote, he's sending around what 2 other people wrote earlier. Correct, sir?
It's part of his communication. It's not separate.
I don't know what you mean by part or separate, and neither one of those were in my question, Mr. Gates. My question is, Mr. Ballmer wrote an email that he sent around, and with that email, he sent around 2 earlier emails. That's clearly what's going on here, right, sir?
He only sent one thing.
All right, sir. The next line says, sent Sunday, December 1, 1996, 9:25 p.m. to Bill Gates, Amor Nehru. Correct?
Did you say 9:25?
Well, on 353, it looks like 9:26.
Right. And you said 9:25.
Okay, then I misspoke.
Do I still have 380?
Unless you've eaten it. Fiscal year 1998, WWSMM attendees. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
It's the Worldwide Sales and Marketing Meeting, otherwise known as the WISM.
Did you attend the fiscal year 1998 WISM? How many people are there in the 14 pluses group?
It's a good question. I think around 200 to 300.
And these would be the people in the 200 or 300 top rated jobs in the company. Is that correct?
If top means the best compensation, yes.
Okay. Netware is something from Novell, correct, sir?
Fact.
What?
Fact.
Does that mean yes?
Yes. Does it say mistake somewhere?
All I'm asking you is whether you interpret this that way.
Does it say mistake somewhere?
Mr. Gates, we have had a conversation about how I ask the questions and you give the answers. I
don't see where it says mistake.
It doesn't say mistake. It says major sin.
And if you think that major sin is something different than a mistake, you can answer my question that no, that's not what you think Mr. Moretz means. My question is clear. You can answer it yes, no, or I can't tell.
What is the question?
Do you recall being told in substance what is stated here? At any time in the language that I have just quoted.
Now that's a self-contradictory question. You can't say you're asking me something in substance and then say in the language you just quoted. That's completely contradictory.
Well, sir, if you don't understand the question or you can't answer it, all you have to do is say so.
Well, I understand that the question is contradictory to itself.
Well,
no.
It doesn't? When you say that somebody is saying that you've seen an email, people saying that we shouldn't force Office users to use our browser and that this is wrong, you're not saying that you should use Office to force users to use your browser? Is that what you're saying?
That was the most circular thing I've ever heard.
Okay, I think it was pretty circular because I think what was going on here is pretty circular.
You continue to not read the sentence and look at the piece of email. The question in this email is whether Office should work equally well with all browsers.
Well, now, sir.
And it's talking about, if you want to look further to understand it, it says we need to have...
The first, actually, we've read the first sentence, but I'll read it again. The first sentence, which is one paragraph, says, there has recently been an exchange on email with people in the Office group about Office and HTML. Second paragraph says, in one piece of mail, people were suggesting that Office had to work equally well with all browsers and that we shouldn't force Office users to use our browser. This is wrong, and I wanted to correct this. Third paragraph says, another suggestion in this mail was that we can't make our own unilateral extensions to HTML. I was going to say this was wrong and correct this also. Now, have I read correctly the first three paragraphs of this memo, Mr. Gates?
Yes.
And is it your testimony that when you said that the email suggesting that Office had to work equally well with all browsers and that Microsoft shouldn't force Office users to use Microsoft's browser was wrong, that all you were talking about there was Trident? Is that your testimony?
I'm not sure what you mean, all I was talking about. This email is about the Office and HTML.
Yes.
There's a new extension to HTML being created in Trident. There was a question of whether Office could take advantage of it, which meant that it would take advantage of those new browsers in a better way than it would take advantage of our old browsers or other people's browsers without those extensions. I was suggesting here, and it's totally a mischaracterization to suggest that that third paragraph isn't totally in line with it, that we should take advantage of those Trident HTML extensions, and therefore Office documents would look better, at least for those users.
And is it your testimony? And all I'm trying to do is clarify your testimony, Mr. Gates, because once the testimony is done and down, the trier of fact can decide what credibility, if any, to give it. All I'm trying to do is identify it. And you have said that the extensions to HTML relate to Trident, correct?
Yes.
Now, what I'm trying to find out is whether these extensions to HTML that relate to Trident is also the only point of your statement that you should force Office users to use your browser.
That's a sentence fragment here. What people were saying was, if we took unique advantage of Trident, wouldn't people feel like they needed to upgrade to Trident? And I said, hey, if that's the only way they can see the advanced document capability, then fine.
Mr. Gates, I mean, that's not what this email says. I mean, the
We
words
certainly
about,
know what the email says.
Yeah, I mean, yes, exactly. I mean, and I don't mean to be disrespectful here, but aren't you doing what we talked about before here, just trying to substitute different words for the words that you actually wrote that you think will sound better in the context of this litigation?
I've explained to you what this email is about. You don't seem to like the facts.
All right, sir. So it is your testimony that taking this email in its whole entirety, that you today are entirely comfortable that the memo, the email, in its entirety, is a fair and accurate statement of your views. Is that correct?
If somebody takes the trouble to understand it, yes.
Right. That is, if somebody reads this document all the way through, takes the trouble to figure out what is here, you say, that's a fair and accurate statement of my views. Correct?
Views on what?
Views on the things that you're talking about in the memo. Let me try to approach it a different way. Sometimes when people write things, after the fact they say, I wish I hadn't written it that way, that just isn't accurate. Or I overstated it, or I got it wrong. Are you saying that about this document?
I guess I can say that if I realized how you might misinterpret the thing, I would have put a little footnote in here for you to help make sure you didn't misinterpret it.
Because I think the one thing that we both, you believe this memo is clear, don't you?
I don't know what you mean by that.
You
made
believe
it clear
this
that
memo-
somebody can misinterpret this memo. Whether that's being done maliciously or not, I don't know. So now I understand that somebody who doesn't understand the subject matter of the memo can misinterpret it. In particular, you can misinterpret what's meant there.
In the third sentence, you say, it's hard to know how much actual benefit little I shell browser integration would bring.
Third paragraph?
Third paragraph of your message.
Not sentence.
Third paragraph of your message.
Right.
First sentence.
Right.
This is a message from you to Mr. Balmer and Mr. Chase with a copy to Mr. Britz, and some other people were also given copies. Dated August 15, 1997 at 4:07 p.m. on the subject of IBM and Netscape, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you type in here, importance, high.
No.
No?
No, I didn't type that.
Who typed in high?
A computer.
A computer. Why did the computer type in high?
It's an attribute of the email.
Uh-huh. And who set the attribute of the email?
Usually the sender sets that attribute.
Who's the sender here, Mr. Gates?
In this case, it appears I'm the sender.
Yes. And so you're the one who set the high designation of importance, right, sir?
It appears I did that. I don't remember doing that specifically.
Right.